Hello, my name is Elaine Sanchez, and I am excited to have the opportunity to share with you my mother's spiritual journey through 6.5 years of caregiving. The stories that I'm going to share with you are direct excerpts from the letters my mother wrote to me while she was caring for my dad after his debilitating stroke. It is the true story of one woman's personal reflections about love, life, loss, and faith, all written in real time. This is my mother's spiritual journey. It begins at a point of lightning strike irreverence, and it ends with her developing a personal and profound relationship with God. I would ask you to listen to her letters with an open mind, a generous heart, and an awareness that there are many, many roads that lead to Damascus. So with that, let's get started. Madelyn Duke, my mother, was born into a Roman Catholic family in McMinnville, Tennessee in 1923. In 1931, my grandpa Duke got a job working on oil wells in Canton, Kansas. Now, my grandmother had heard that Catholics were not liked or welcomed in that little town, so they joined the Christian church. Madelyn started questioning God early on. As a teenager, she decided to reject the God of the Old Testament because she simply could not believe in a God that was as vengeful toward women as the one that she was hearing about in Sunday school. Now, in 1939, she met Quentin Cuban, a handsome young dairy farmer. She was 16, he was 21. They fell in love. The day after Pearl Harbor was bombed, Quentin enlisted in the Army Air Corps, and he was sent to McChord Air Force Base in Tacoma, Washington, for training. On September 5, 1942, just a few weeks shy of Madelyn's 19th birthday, Quentin met her at the train station in Tacoma. They were married by the Justice of the Peace the next day. Shortly after the wedding, Quentin was shipped off to the South Pacific to fight in World War II. Madelyn got back on the train, returned to Kansas, where she worked and waited for Quentin for the next 3.5 years. When the war was over, they started their life together on a dairy farm 6 miles northwest of McPherson, Kansas, a town of about 9,000 or 10,000 people at that time. Their farm, which had been homesteaded by Quentin's grandfather, was smack in the middle of an incredibly conservative farming community, where it was just accepted that certain things always had been and always would be done in a certain way. For instance, women did their wash first thing Monday morning, and they had it snapping on the line before noon. They did their ironing on Tuesday, baking on Wednesday, cleaning on Thursday, and so on and so forth. Now, there was only one problem with this. Madelyn was not and never would be a traditional woman. She got pregnant quickly, and on their way to town to buy a washing machine one day, she announced to Quentin, "I want to buy a front-loading automatic Bendix." And Quentin said, "Oh, no. My mother had a double-tub Dexter. Her mother had a double-tub Dexter. And you will have a double-tub Dexter." Now, just in case you don't remember, double-tub Dexters had 2 large vats, one for the wash water, one for the rinse water, and there was a wringer in between. And Madelyn said, "Fine, you want to wash the diapers? We'll get a double-tub Dexter. However, if you want me to do the laundry, we're going to get a front-loading automatic Bendix." Well, Madelyn got her Bendix before Larry was born. When Greg came along 2 years later, she got an electric dryer. 18 months after that, when Jean was born, she got a mangle for ironing, and 23 months later, when I came along, she got a dishwasher. My claim to fame is I was the dishwasher baby. Now, life on the farm wasn't easy. There was always a lot of work. There was never enough money. The cow lot was less than 50 yards from the kitchen door. And I remember when I used to complain about the smell, my dad would say, "Oh, honey, that's the smell of money." Well, it never smelled like money to me, and I guarantee you it never spent like it either. But the summer I was 9, there was a lot of excitement around our place because we had prospects for the best wheat harvest ever. There was even talk of taking a vacation that year. And then, one afternoon, as it does in Kansas, the storm clouds started building up in the southwest. And we watched the approaching storm with a combination of dread and hope. We knew what was coming, but we still hoped that somehow our fields would be spared. But when the rain started, it came in huge, heavy drops that quickly turned into hailstones the size of my fist. It didn't last long, probably less than 15 minutes, but by the time it had passed through, our crops and our primary source of income for that year were gone. And that was the year my mother realized she hated the farm. She hated the cows, she hated the flies, she hated the smell, and she hated being poor. But she loved my father, and she had all us kids to raise. Divorce was not an option, so she had to figure out a way to make it work. She did 2 things that summer that changed her life. She got a job in town, and she became a devotee of self-help books. There was one book in particular that had a tremendous impact on her. It was Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of a Nazi concentration camp. Now, I have such a clear memory of being in the milk barn and hearing her recount Dr. Frankl's story. She told me how the Nazis had taken everything from him, his family, his home, and his business. And when he arrived at Auschwitz, all he had remaining were the clothes on his back and a suitcase in which he was carrying a manuscript of a book that he had been working on for 10 years. They took his suitcase and threw that on one pile. Then they took his clothes and they threw them on another pile. And that was the beginning of 4 years of systematic degradation, humiliation, and control. About 2 years into his internment, he realized it wasn't always the youngest, the healthiest, or the strongest who were surviving. Now, granted, no one had any defense against a gas chamber or dysentery, but the difference between the people who survived and those who died in the work camp was often attitude. He wrote, "We who lived in the concentration camps can remember men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." Viktor Frankl became my mother's personal hero. She knew she couldn't control the weather. She knew she would never have any influence over what they were going to get paid for their milk, wheat, Milo, or corn. But she believed, like Viktor Frankl, she could become the master of her own mind. Now, controlling her thinking, choosing her attitude, and believing in a loving and benevolent God helped her get through some very difficult years. There were droughts, hailstorms, crop failures, and constant financial struggle. In 1969, 2 of her 3 sons received orders for Vietnam on the same day. A few years later, she took on the care of her aging and frail parents and her often cranky and controlling father-in-law, my Grandpa Stan. Perhaps it's just as well that she had no idea that she would actually face her greatest challenges in her golden years.